You know that crystallizing moment when your own child, standing under the brilliant shimmer of ballroom chandeliers at her own wedding, decides your life's ambition is the perfect material for a stand-up routine? That happened to me. But what followed was a chain reaction so swift and so absolute that the sound of 200 guests laughing at my expense turned into a silence so profound you could hear a champagne flute drop. And one did. Picture it. The Grand Astoria Hotel's Imperial Ballroom, a space dripping with old-world elegance, all gilded moldings and velvet drapes. My daughter, Clara, was a vision in ivory lace, a princess from a storybook, about to marry her handsome prince, Mark. I was so proud, my heart felt like it might burst. The reception was a symphony of clinking glasses and happy murmurs, until Clara, my beautiful, sharp-tongued daughter, took the microphone for what I assumed would be a heartfelt toast. Instead, she scanned the room, a mischievous glint in her eye, and began. "I'd like to say a few words about my wonderful mother," she said, her voice bright and clear. The guests smiled warmly. "She's embarking on what I can only describe as a spirited late-life adventure." A few polite chuckles rippled through the room. "At 62, she continued, making theatrical finger quotes, she's decided she wants to build an empire. We keep telling her she should embrace retirement, maybe take up watercolor painting, but she's quite determined." The laughter grew louder, a wave of collective amusement washing over me, leaving me feeling chilled and exposed. I sat there, a serene smile plastered on my face, while inside I was crumbling. But here's the secret that hung in the air, unknown to everyone, including my own daughter. While they were all laughing at the quaint old woman playing business, the most powerful man in that room was sitting at table 6, his face slowly turning pale as he stared at me in dawning horror. Because what happened next involved Clara's new husband's boss standing up, nearly choking on his vintage Dom Perignon, and uttering the words that would detonate the carefully constructed reality of everyone present. To understand how my daughter's wedding toast became the most profound moment of vindication in my life, I have to take you back 2 years, to the day my old life ended and my new one began. 2 years earlier, I was Eleanor Vance, age 60, recently divorced and unceremoniously downsized. After 30 years as a senior financial analyst for a major corporation, I was restructured out of a job, a polite euphemism for being replaced by someone younger and cheaper. For the first time in my adult life, I was utterly adrift. My ex-husband had already remarried a woman younger than we were daughter, a classic midlife crisis cliché. Clara, then 32, was busy with her own life, planning her future with Mark. And I was alone, in a quiet condo, the silence punctuated only by the question, "What now?" At 60, when the world has gently but firmly pushed you towards the exit, you have 2 choices. You can accept the narrative that your best years are behind you, or you can decide that a lifetime of experience is not a liability, but an asset of immense value. I chose the latter. I started a private equity firm, Van Hard Solutions. It sounded grand, but it began at my dining room table with an old laptop and a lifetime of savings. My niche was specific. I acquired mid-sized companies in the renewable energy sector and used my financial and operational expertise to make them not just profitable, but sustainable leaders in their field. It was complex, demanding work, and I was exceptionally good at it. The problem, the people closest to me thought it was an adorable hobby. "Mom, you're 62, not a Silicon Valley startup bro," Clara would say, rolling her eyes when I mentioned a successful acquisition. Mark, her fiancé, was worse. He would condescendingly try to explain market capitalization to me, a woman who had managed portfolios larger than his annual salary before he'd even graduated college. "Have you considered just getting a part-time job, Eleanor? This entrepreneur phase seems so stressful. You missed your window for this sort of thing. my own sister would ask. Their dismissal was a constant low-grade humiliation. I was closing multi-million-dollar deals, yet my family treated me like I was selling handmade jewelry at a craft fair. When Clara began planning her wedding, she made her position painfully clear. "Mom, please don't embarrass me in front of Mark's colleagues. His boss, Mr. Harrison from Apex Innovations, will be there. They're serious people. Just say you're retired or between projects. Please don't mention your little business." I agreed, not wanting to mar her perfect day. I loved my daughter more than my pride. So I quietly wrote a check for half the wedding expenses, money earned from my little business, which she blithely assumed was the last of my divorce settlement. Sitting at that reception, listening to the jokes at my expense, I realized my family wasn't just unsupportive, they were ashamed of me for refusing to grow old quietly. And that knowledge was a deeper wound than any layoff. The day had started beautifully. The ceremony was flawless. Clara looked ethereal, and I wept tears of genuine joy. During the cocktail hour, I kept my promise, mingling quietly and avoiding Mark's work crowd. I overheard them discussing market strategies and recent acquisitions in the green tech sector, a world I knew intimately, but I just smiled and introduced myself as Clara's mother. Then came the speeches. The maid of honor, a woman I'd known since she was in pigtails, took the stage and launched into her roast. "I have to talk about Eleanor, who's been quite a character lately," she grinned. "She's decided to become a business tycoon at 60. We keep telling her to act her age, but at least it keeps her busy instead of just gardening like other moms, right?" The room roared with laughter. I felt my cheeks burn as 200 people, strangers and family alike, laughed at a caricature of me. The worst part was watching Clara's face. She wasn't mortified. She was beaming, nodding along as if it were the most charming tribute imaginable. When she took the microphone herself, I held a sliver of hope she might soften the blow. She did the opposite. "Yes," she laughed. "My mom is on a real adventure. She keeps talking about building a business empire, but we're just trying to gently remind her that some dreams have expiration dates." The room howled. Mark's colleagues were wiping tears from their eyes. But we support her hobby, of course, even if it means listening to her talk about client meetings and strategic growth like she's a real CEO. The condescension in her voice, the public dismissal of my life's work, it broke something in me. This wasn't teasing, it was cruelty, served with a smile in front of the very people whose respect I had earned 100 times over without them even knowing it. I decided I would slip out after the cake cutting. My heart was shattered, but it was still her day. Before I could escape, the post-speech pleasantries began. Guests approached me with the kind of pitying smiles reserved for children who have tried and failed. "Good for you, for trying something new at your age," one of Mark's aunts said, patting my arm. One of his colleagues added, "That's wonderful. My mother-in-law started a little Etsy shop. It keeps her so busy." They were trying to be kind, but their words painted me as a sad, lonely woman in need of a pastime to fill my empty days. The final straw came from my new son-in-law. Mark pulled me aside, a conspiratorial grin on his face. "Eleanor, thanks for being such a good sport," he said. "I know Clara was just having fun. But hey, about your consulting thing, I hope you're not putting too much pressure on yourself to make it big. At your age, it's more about staying engaged than actually building a career, right?" I stared at him, speechless. This was the man my daughter had chosen. "Mark," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "what exactly do you think I do?" He shrugged. "Some kind of consulting for local businesses, right? Helping them with their websites or something? It's nice." I excused myself to the restroom, my composure cracking. My own family thought I was playing at business. They had no idea that in the past 18 months, Vanguard Solutions had acquired 6 companies, including a major player in the sustainable energy sector worth more than Mark would earn in his entire lifetime. On my way back, I overheard Clara talking to a friend. Poor Mom, she was saying with a sigh. This whole business thing is just her way of feeling important again after the divorce. We don't have the heart to tell her it's never going to be anything real. Her friend nodded sympathetically. Totally. At least she's not one of those depressing empty nesters who calls you 5 times a day. The irony was staggering. While Clara was worried about me being a depressing empty nester, I was managing a portfolio of assets that would soon make headlines in the Wall Street Journal. I made it through dinner, a ghost at the feast, planning my quiet exit. But then something unexpected happened. A distinguished-looking man with silver hair approached my table. It was Mr. Harrison, the CEO of Apex Innovations. I had been avoiding him all night. "Mrs. Vance," he said politely, extending a hand, "I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I am Robert Harrison, Mark's supervisor." "It's Miss Vance, actually. And yes, Mr. Harrison, I know who you are." "He mentioned you're in business consulting," he said, making polite conversation. "What kind of work do you do?" I looked at this man, who had no idea his world was about to tilt on its axis, and made a decision. I was done being small. "I specialize in acquisitions and operational restructuring," I said, my voice steady. "I help companies in the sustainable energy sector optimize their growth potential." He nodded, still smiling politely. "Fascinating. Mostly with small, local businesses, I imagine?" "Actually," I said, meeting his gaze, "I focus on mid to large cap companies, firms that are ready to scale but need strategic guidance in capital investment." His eyebrows raised a fraction. "Really? Have you worked with any companies I might know?" This was it, the moment of truth. After the humiliation of the evening, I was tired of hiding. "Actually, yes," I said, letting a small, quiet smile touch my lips. "I recently completed the acquisition of Apex Innovations." The change in his expression was dramatic and absolute. His polite smile froze, then dissolved as his eyes widened in shock. The pieces began clicking into place with audible, frantic speed in his mind. Apex Innovations was acquired by Vanguard Solutions. He whispered, his voice barely a breath. He stared at me, true comprehension dawning. You're E. Vance?" "The very same," I confirmed. The color drained from his face. "My God," he stammered, his champagne glass trembling in his hand. "Mrs. Vance, I had no idea. When Mark said his mother-in-law was in consulting, I never imagined." He looked around the ballroom, at the laughing guests, many of whom were his own senior employees. "This is mortifying," he said. "The way people have been talking to you, treating you." He shook his head in disbelief. "Do you realize," he said, his voice low and urgent, "that half the people in this room work for companies in your portfolio? They've been making jokes about your hobby when you literally own them?" Just then, Mark ambled over, a nervous smile on his face. "Everything okay here? You two seem to be having a pretty intense chat," he said, trying to sound casual. Mr. Harrison looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I gave him the slightest of nods. The charade was over. "Mark," he said, his voice tight with disbelief, "we were just discussing your mother-in-law's consulting." Mark chuckled, patting my shoulder with infuriating condescension. "Oh, that. Yeah, Eleanor's been trying her hand at the business world. It's cute how seriously she takes it, right?" The look of pure horror on Robert Harrison's face was something I would cherish forever. "Mark," he said slowly, as if speaking to a child, "I don't think you understand who you're talking to. Your mother-in-law isn't playing at business. She is business. Miss Vance is E. Vance of Vanguard Solutions. She owns Sterling Technologies. She owns the company we work for." The silence stretched. Mark's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. And then Mr. Harrison seemed to reach a breaking point. "You know what?" he said, his voice rising with indignation. "I think everyone needs to know this." Before I could stop him, he was striding to the stage and taking the microphone from the DJ. "Excuse me, everyone," he boomed, his voice silencing the music and conversation. 200 heads turned towards him. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need to share something remarkable. We have all been operating under a serious misunderstanding tonight, and I need to offer a profound apology, especially to the mother of the bride, Mrs. Eleanor Vance." Clara stared at him, bewildered. "We've been treating Miss Vance as if she were an amateur dabbling in a hobby. What we failed to realize is that Eleanor Vance is in fact E. Vance, the founder and CEO of Vanguard Solutions. Uh, she is one of the most brilliant and successful entrepreneurs in our industry." A collective gasp went through the room. In the past 18 months alone, her firm has acquired 6 major companies, including Apex Innovations, where I am the CEO. She has built a $50 million portfolio while we have been patting her on the head and laughing at her late-life crisis. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, chaos.
"What?" Clara shrieked, the sound tearing through the stunned quiet. I saw executives from companies I owned whispering frantically to their spouses, their faces pale with panic. The man who'd compared me to his Etsy-crafting mother-in-law looked physically ill. Mr. Harrison's voice cut through the noise again. So when we were making jokes about her unrealistic dreams, we were, in fact, mocking our own boss. Then he looked at me and held out the microphone. "I believe Ms. Vance should have the final word." Every eye in the room was on me. My voice was steady when I spoke. "Yes," I said calmly, "it's all true." I looked directly at my daughter, whose face was a mask of shock and horror. "Clara, honey, I didn't say anything because you specifically asked me not to talk about my business. You were embarrassed by what you thought was my little hobby, so I respected your wishes." I let the words hang in the air. "When you gave your speech about dreams having expiration dates, you were talking about a business that employs over 400 people. When you said I was being unrealistic, you were referring to accomplishments that have already happened." Clara looked utterly devastated. Not with pride, but with the crushing weight of her own public misjudgment. Later, as the disastrous reception wound down, she approached me, her eyes red-rimmed. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I feel terrible. I was so awful to you." "Rachel, you stood in front of 200 people and you mocked me for refusing to act my age. You told everyone my dreams were a joke. That's not just a mistake. That was cruel. We have a lot to work through." 6 months later, things are different. Mark now calls me Ms. Vance at family dinners and asks for business advice. My sister brags to her friends about her powerhouse entrepreneur sister. Clara and I are in therapy, slowly rebuilding our relationship on a new foundation of respect. It's hard work, but it's real. And my business? It's thriving. Mr. Harrison is now my most trusted COO, and several guests from the wedding are now my newest clients. It turns out that having your success dramatically revealed at a high-profile wedding is excellent for marketing. At 62, I've learned the most important lesson of all. Never, ever underestimate a woman who has decided she is done being underestimated.